are joined now by Kevin Sjuts from 1011 News in Lincoln. Kevin, what's going on, buddy?
Good morning. Hope you guys had a nice bye week.
Yeah, how was your bye?
I enjoyed it. It was really good. College football is a lot of fun. Sometimes when Nebraska plays, I don't get to see as much as the common fan until, I don't know, midnight, 1 a.m. But being able to just kind of follow along with some of those great overtime games. And, Oregon, the Oregon-Penn State game was awesome. And being able to just kind of enjoy that from the comfort of my home was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to say that was probably the best part about Saturday, that the day continued to ramp up as it went on. Like, the games just got better and better because LSU Ole Miss was pretty good. You had Indiana, Iowa. And then when you hit Saturday night, you were like very primed and ready to be able to get great football.
Full tilt.
I mean, couldn't have asked for a better Saturday slate.
Yeah, you left out Tennessee, Mississippi State. That was an overtime game.
Great one.
That
Yeah,
was really
great
exciting.
One.
And what was crazy was, like, for whatever reason, my network of friends and family members, I knew people that were at Indiana, Iowa. I knew somebody that was at the Missouri game. I knew somebody that was at the Texas A&M game. So, like, it was cool just being able to kind of follow along through other people that were at games. And I was at none. And I was vicariously living through a bunch of people.
Kevin, let me ask you this. Did watching the games last Saturday did it change how you felt about Nebraska at all? Just seeing, because I know a lot of times with what we do, especially, you don't always get to consume a ton of other college football on a game day like that. Did getting to see all of that, all the big matchups, a couple of Big Ten ones, whether it's Penn State, Oregon, or Illinois, USC, whatever, Indiana, Iowa, did it make you feel better or worse about the situation Nebraska finds itself in?
Great question. I don't know. I think that this isn't going to quite answer your question, Ravi, which is a good one, and you really got my wheel spinning here. I think in previous years, I would watch on the bye week and think Nebraska's pretty far off. I think I watched this past weekend, and think about where Nebraska's at in terms of the 4 games we've seen so far, and I don't feel like they are as far off as in previous years. Maybe that's the play of Bill and Raiola so far in the offense, finding ways to put the ball in the end zone. I think I would be, if anything, I'm maybe a little bit more encouraged about where Nebraska's at on a national perspective than I have been in previous years during Nebraska's bye week.
Okay, so Kevin, that kind of leads me to my question then about how did you feel leaving Memorial Stadium that Saturday against Michigan? Obviously a disappointing result for Nebraska. There was I felt like a lot of visceral concern there, but I think the general fan base has really weaned off of like what happened, and maybe it was through the next week of college football, taking some time away from it. Everyone, had a chance to look at the rest of the slate. Do you get the sense that maybe like the fan base has like calmed down, the program's like kind of back to even after that loss?
Yeah, those are two completely different feelings, Austin, from what everybody was feeling on the Sunday after the Michigan loss to October 1st. I think everybody has calmed down, and I think everybody can start to reason with, at the end of it, it's a loss, and Nebraska's 3-1. And I think in the moment, everybody was so worked up and trying to like have a knee-jerk reaction about like, well, the season's not going to be what we were hoping the season would be. And then once you have time to decompress the game and collect your thoughts, you realize that folks that predicted Nebraska to go 10-2 or 9-3, Michigan might have been one of those losses anyway to begin with. So it doesn't really change your overall perspective of the season and what this team might still do. And I think everybody's in agreement now, too, that instead of having some angst about the Michigan loss, there's maybe more ramped up excitement and anticipation for the month of October. These games coming up over the next few weeks, they are not sexy, but they are hugely important to what Nebraska's season is going to look like in terms of the record at the end of 2025.
Yeah, it's we were talking about this earlier, and this next month, right? You mentioned none of these are sexy wins, right? These are wins that you don't get a lot of credit for, but you get hammered if you lose. But those are the games that Nebraska has struggled with the most, it seems like, right, Kevin? Like, I don't think most people go out and they don't think about last year as a disappointment because they lost to Ohio State. They think of it as a disappointment because of, the loss to Iowa or obviously Indiana was a whole other thing last year, or the loss to Illinois, right? And I think that's that's pretty common over the last, like, I mean, until at least you get back to Bo, when the whole thing was like, oh, they can't win any big games. So for at least the last 10 years, these are the games that have kind of, like, if we left this season, Kevin, and I know that most people were somewhere in the 8-4 to 9-3 range in predictions, and you said, hey, Nebraska lost to Michigan, USC, and Penn State this year. They went 9-3. Those are the 3 losses. I think most people would be more than okay with that, right?
Considering Nebraska won 6 games in the regular season last year, absolutely. That's like, because you just referenced Bo Pelini, Ravi, and I feel like that's Nebraska's next step as a program, is getting to a Bo Pelini-esque season.
Agreed.
And that's not taking down the giant on the schedule. That's just avoiding the bad losses and beating the teams that Nebraska should beat. And frankly, I would expect the Huskers to be favored in every game in the month of October. So that's why this is such a critical stretch ahead, because if you want to have that 8 or 9 win season, you have to beat a Michigan State, a Maryland, a Minnesota, and Northwestern. Doable? Yes. But has it happened every year since, 2013? No. So I think that, like, that's really what is going to be the ultimate gauge of this season, is what happens in October. And that also sets the table for what November looks like. If Nebraska somehow goes 2-2 in this month, now November looks and feels completely different. If Nebraska goes 4-0, you've got momentum. You're 7-1 going into November, and a couple of big-time games in that month. Like, it feels different. There's excitement, and you probably have a better chance of stealing one of those games that you maybe aren't favored in.
Kevin, is that where you start to feel kind of the sense of, you haven't had the marquee win, you haven't had the marquee season like what we had hoped to see in the first 2 seasons under Rule, but is this where you start to kind of convince yourself that, yeah, the program has turned the corner, because you can convince yourself of some of these other things, even if the results aren't happening yet, or maybe are about to happen when we go through October into November?
I think everybody answers the statement, turn the corner, differently. Some people turn the corner. You only do that with beating a Michigan and getting rid of that, ranked team losing streak, or going to Happy Valley and being competitive with Penn State. Some people would consider turning the corner, just going undefeated in the month of October. That's the camp that I exist in. It's just, because honestly, if Nebraska wins 9 games in the regular season, maybe 10, you're playing on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
And I would qualify turning the corner as playing on New Year's Day. And, I mentioned a scenario in which the Huskers would possibly be 7-1 entering November. If that plays out and is the case, I would presume when everybody starts to really pay attention to the college football playoff predictions, Nebraska is going to be on the screen. I don't know where they will be, but they've got to be listed somewhere.
Hey, I mean, I think that's a perfect metaphor for where Nebraska is trying to get. Just be on the screen, right? Just get yourself on the screen.
You don't have to get on the screen by beating a big-time team. Would that be nice? Yes. But you don't have to do that. Maybe we'll have the conversation at the beginning of November and have a different tone about it, because I still remember under Mike Riley when Nebraska started the season so strong. They went to, I believe, Indiana. That was the famous Tommy Armstrong Jr. quote where he goes, somebody was asking about Nebraska being ranked, and the record looked a little bit like fool's gold because Nebraska hadn't really played anybody. And Tommy goes, if they don't like us, take us out. Take us out like 5 times. And it was so passionate. And for me, I'll never forget that moment, because his argument was Nebraska's playing the schedule that they have. And, if they think 7-1 isn't good enough to be a top 15 team, don't have them in the top 15. But by nature, winning games that, like, what are we starting to, like, not, like, feel so good about winning games? They have to be big games? Okay, you can do that in the SEC. Right now, with what Nebraska has on the schedule and in the Big Ten, they don't have that luxury. So just win the games you can. And I think if they're 7-1, they're going to be on the screen. And I do think that's kind of a gauge of, like, taking the next step.
Kevin, so I just want to follow up with that too, just about, you talk about what you're able to watch over the past weekend. top 25 voting. Obviously, you can't. The problem is that Nebraska wasn't in the top 25 in the preseason. That's why they're going to be kind of, knocked down a peg, not getting as many votes as they might have or would have after a Michigan loss a couple weeks ago. But are there any other teams in that category with Nebraska that you would consider like maybe should be receiving more top 25 consideration, should be in the top 25, should be higher, just based off of where they were in the preseason rankings?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Because I think Mississippi State's one of those. I think, like you said earlier, I think they're one of them.
Possibly. I mean, but it's going to be so hard to like go apples to apples with Nebraska and Mississippi State. One of the teams that I first thought of was BYU. Now, granted, they're in the rankings right now, but I think if Nebraska's on the field with BYU, I don't know if the game's played at a neutral site. I don't know who I'm picking. I think BYU might be the favorite, but I think that Nebraska is just as good as BYU from what I've seen from them so far this year. So I don't think, just going off of the eye test and without looking at, resumes and getting too far into the metrics of both teams, just on feel and what I've seen with the naked eye, I feel like there's not a whole lot of separation between Nebraska and a team that is currently in the back half of the top 25.
That's our guy, Kevin Sjuts, 1011 News in Lincoln. Kevin, appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kevin.